My name's Unky Rob, and this is my very first YouTube long-form video. I wanted to make this real quick because I didn't realize it's already time for season 3 of House of Dragon to come out. It's just coming out this Sunday, and I had this idea for a video, and it kind of only works if it comes out before. So just to take a little step back and let you know a little bit about me, I'm a huge Game of Thrones fan. There's a lot of other IPs that I'm big fans of that I'll touch on, complain about, wax nostalgic about, and whatever on this channel, but this just happens to be the first one. Game of Thrones was real big for me, even the later years. Later seasons don't take away from just the pure awesomeness of the first 4 to 5 seasons. But that got me, Game of Thrones actually got me into reading again, which I was never much of a reader, but I really dove deep into the sprawling Song of Earth and Fire universe. Reading the books, collecting graphic novels, and reading the companion novels like Fire and Blood, which is what most of House of Dragon gets its story. And House of Dragon Season 3 looks great. It currently has 97% on Rotten Tomatoes, where Season 2 had 84% among critics, Season 1 90% among critics. So that's looking great. Like the title says, I have one big ask for House of the Dragon Season 3. And it may not be what you think, because if you go around and ask a bunch of people how to describe Game of Thrones, the first series, or just when you mention Game of Thrones, what do you think of when somebody is talking Game of Thrones? I've asked multiple people this, I've asked even different AIs this, and they pretty much come up with the same points. The big one is obviously political intrigue. Fluid alliances, backstabbing, scheming, that's something that both shows have in droves. Political intrigue isn't fun if it's not filled with shocking death, and that's again something that both shows have. Game of Thrones is also known for its morally gray characters. That's something that people always talk about, and House of Dragon has that too. So those are the 3 biggest points that people like to talk about when they talk about Game of Thrones. And there's more. There's the world building, which was really important in Game of Thrones, and they're expanding more in House of Dragon, massive production values, and hey, we got to have that mature content too. That's really important because this is HBO. But if you just did a watch through of Game of Thrones once or twice or even 3 times, these would be the big points that I mentioned that would stick out at you. But you would forget about one that's really important. And that to me is that Game of Thrones had a lot of humor. Not only did Game of Thrones have a lot of humor, but there was a lot of different types of humor. Tyrion is the big one, of course. I mean, Tyrion with his razor-sharp wit, weaponized for survival, he was probably the biggest character that brought comedy to the table, and it helped that he survived from season 1 all the way to season 8. But there was plenty of others too, and they might not have been main characters that were like, regular comedians, but they mostly had a comedic companion character to kind of break the mood a little bit from all the misery or the death. And just examples of that, Tyrion and Jaime both had Bronn with his low-born cynicism, unapologetic disrespect for nobility and the knighthood.
Sir Tarin Mant and Sir Who's It of Who Cares.
Jon had a couple characters in his arc. He had Sam, that neurotic nerd in the hyper-masculine military environment, and Ygritte for a time there with her and their odd couple dynamic, with Jon being tightly wound and buttoned up and Ygritte being more of a loose wildling.
Oh, a spider! Save me, Jon Snow!
And Bran had Hodor. Arya for a time had the Hounds.
He killed Lummy.
What the f***'s a Lummy?
Sansa, during her arc, had Lady Olenna for a bit, the old woman with no care for societal niceties. She was fun.
And squires, stable boy. And you never...
Never.
And there's many, many more. Podrick, Tormund, even King Robert, pretty much one of the biggest main characters of season 1. He had quite a few zingers himself.
You heard the hand. The king's too fat for his armor. Go find the breastplate stretcher.
But you're thinking, this is Game of Thrones. This is, death and war and blah, blah, blah. Does there need to be so much comedy? Well, it helps. These shows are about experience emotion, and they're good with the dark emotions, with the deaths and the big losses and the shocking moments. But if we're here to experience emotion, why not experience them all? Why not add humor on top of that? Another reason humor is important is it's like an emotional palate cleanser. When you're dealing with all of this dark, heavy stuff, why not have an emotional rest or reset so you can be ready for the onslaught of more misery that's yet to come. It's also important that it takes bigger than life characters and it makes them kind of more human. Someone like Sandor Clegane in Game of Thrones, he's a miserable jerk, but he's pointing out that life is unfair and cruel in almost a comedic fashion.
You dead?
Yes!
How?
He was killed.
Who by?
Meryn Trant.
The greatest swordsman who ever lived, killed by Meryn f***ing Trant.
Syrio didn't have a sword.
Greatest swordsman ever lived, didn't have a sword.
Without that, he's just a miserable jerk. But now he's a funny miserable jerk. And it just helps flesh out that character a little more. I do struggle when I watch House of the Dragon to find as much humor as I did in Game of Thrones. And I think a little bit of that's on purpose. House of Dragon is going for a darker classic tragedy. It's almost Shakespearean in nature. And there is some bit of humor in House of Dragon. Daemon, I think, is the biggest. It's a very dry humor, but he is the biggest attempt at humor. He's kind of like Tyrion. He's very witty, but he's also just kind of darker. But I remember watching season 1, there's one moment that really stuck out to me that had me doing that Leonardo DiCaprio meme. And that's when Rhaenyra in the one episode had a bunch of suitors lined up to impress her that she was supposed to choose one to eventually marry. And those feuding houses, the Brackens and the Blackwoods. So I thought that was, kind of like humor, but that dark Game of Thrones humor. That's the kind of stuff I'm looking for that I want more of. And, there was a little bit of humor in season 2. A couple characters stuck out. Wayne Hightower, the pompous knight, and Simon Strong, the naturally anxious Harrenhal Castellan. So that's my big ask for season 3 of House of Dragon. I just hope they can look back at the one thing that to me has been kind of missing from the last couple seasons that really helped Game of Thrones shine is that humor aspect. And I'm not saying House of Dragon has no humor, and it doesn't need to be a yuck fest laugh riot, but it seems to me like a Game of Thrones product like House of Dragon seems a little emptier without it because it was so prominent through Game of Thrones, and a lot of people tend to forget that. So anyways, that's my big ask for House of Dragon season 3. Again, the early critic reviews seem promising. So anyways, we'll see if this weekend, if they follow through on my big ask. Thanks for watching. Peace.